Good evening, everyone. I'm Marcel Acosta, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Capital Planning Commission. I'd like to welcome all of you to the Commission today, and we have some very exciting news to share with you in terms of our Southwest Eco District project. And really today we're going to focus on 10th Street and the Banneker connection, which is a major part of our planning initiative. So for the last few months, the Southwest Eco District Task Force and staff have been busy refining the concepts for 10th Street and the interim connection at Banneker Park, which many of you have looked at in last May. And while this presentation tonight largely focuses on design, I'd like to kind of share with you some of the broader context in terms of this project, because this is a very important location in the city, and I think is one of the most unique areas with a lot of potential to do big things here and for the betterment of the city. And this is something that we envisioned in our Monumental Core Framework Plan, which we had produced in 2009. It was really an effort to connect the National Mall to the waterfront. And if you were on the mall today, you would really have no sense that there was great waterfront beyond there. And with the great activity that's going on in terms of the new development that's going along the Southwest waterfront, there's a great opportunity to make that connection. We have a federal enclave, and many of you have been there, that is in need of much improvement, that it's not a mixed-use environment. It isn't a very vibrant part of our city. It's one that we see in terms of major opportunities to transform that area into something much more vibrant and something much more compelling for the residents of the city, as well as those who work there, as well as visitors to our nation's capital. So it has all the ingredients that you would want in order to do that. And if you really thought about it, it's one of the more unique places. I mean, where else would you have the National Mall in your backyard? Where else would you have the Jefferson Memorial and the Lincoln Memorial right at your doorstep? Where else would you have the Smithsonian Institution as your neighbor? And also, you know, again, a new waterfront development, where Banneker Overlook will be a primary place where you can kind of see the sweep of the Potomac and all the activity that will be going on there over the next decade. So now's the time. And there's a lot of activity going on in the federal government in terms of the General Services Administration look at how to revitalize and renovate or even create more mixed-use projects in around the Department of Energy building and some of the other federal assets that we have. We also are seeing a lot of interest in terms of 10th Street, and perhaps even museum sponsors too that may be looking at Banneker Overlook as a new place to put in a major cultural institution. So it's an incredible opportunity, one that all of us I think want to see happen over the next couple of years. And it really isn't a hypothetical. I think, again, the momentum is there today, and I think the discussion that we'll have tonight with all of you, things that you'll tell us about the neighborhood, things that you want to see, your reactions to the designs that we present, I think will help us shape a better future for this part of the city. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Diane Sullivan, the project manager for this effort, and she'll walk you through the agenda tonight. And then you'll also have an opportunity to talk to us around the boards to really get a better sense of what we're proposing for this area. So I'll turn it over to Diane.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming here tonight. I know we're competing with several other events this evening, so we're happy to have you here with us. The last public meeting we had was in May, so we have been doing a lot of work since then. And tonight, the way I think we're going to present this is Otto Condon and I, Otto's with ZGF, are going to provide an overview. I'll provide a project overview of everything that's sort of going on in and around the Eco District, because things are moving so quickly that it's good to do that every few months. And with 10th Street and Banneker connection, Otto's going to walk through the short-term improvements and then the concept for the interim connection at Banneker, and then the long-term improvements. And then together, Otto and I are going to talk a little bit about a new effort that we have started here with regards to design guidelines for the Southwest Eco District, and that has important implications for 10th Street itself. And after that, we will move over and we're happy to discuss all of this over at the boards, and are really excited to hear your thoughts. Okay, so probably the big thing that's going on in the Eco District is GSA's work with the Federal Triangle South. You may recall last December they issued the request for information for Looking at the land outlined in blue here, which is a good portion of the Southwest Eco District boundary outlined in red. And they basically issued that RFI looking to redevelop or revitalize their federal property to meet their needs and their client agency needs as well, and then to also try and meet some of the objectives of the Southwest Eco District Plan. And we are anxiously awaiting the release of that RFP, which as of right now they are saying, I guess I can't say fall anymore, but it should be very soon now. But that's gonna be a really important first step for the redevelopment of this area. We've been working very closely with the DC Office of Planning and with GSA on the new zoning for the area defined by Federal Triangle South. That zoning has been proposed. It's available for comment, and I'm not going to go into any details about that, but really what it does right now is it's looking to figure out how to incentivize new streets in the area and residential development, both of which are very important to achieving the Southwest Eco District vision. And then we have the Maryland Avenue Southwest Transportation Study. Actually, Shannon Hake is here if you have any specific questions for her, the project manager at DDOT. But basically where we're at, that's the study to look at the technical and financial feasibility of decking over Maryland Avenue. And I'd say right now they are at, we've had a bunch of interagency meetings, and I know there's been some public meetings, and I think another one coming up soon. And they're looking at the alternatives to the small area plan right now and the traffic analysis. So more of that to come soon. I want to mention the stormwater infrastructure study. Many of you might recall that we proposed a district water system for 10th Street and the parcels along it. We received a lot of great feedback on that proposal. People are very supportive of this idea, and what we wanted to do was take it a little bit further and study the technical and financial feasibility of actually making this happen. And that study will be available hopefully by the end of this year on NCPC's website. We're finishing up the draft now. And I just want to say that what's really interesting about this is it relies heavily on the District Department of the Environment's new stormwater credit program. But in analyzing what it would take to actually treat stormwater and gray water for non-potable water use, and then to tap well water for potable water needs in this area, that if we could get a reasonable payback for those credits, this actually is a very a system that could be financed. The return on investment is actually it's very good, as you can see here. If you assumed getting $2 per credit, that you could return on investment could be 5 to 7 years. So there's a lot of detail in that study, and if you're interested in that, that should be available very soon on NCPC's website. And that also actually played a big role in the designs itself for 10th Street, which Otto will talk about. Many of you might know that the BID, the Business Improvement District for Southwest, in the boundary is the larger gray area that you see there. It encompasses all of the Southwest Eco District. That was introduced to the DC Council this past fall, and they hope to be up and running in early 2014, which is very exciting. And they've been very supportive of this project and the entire Southwest Eco District plan, but are particularly interested in 10th Street and this interim connection at Banneker, and really starting to already talk about some of the short-term improvements that we can do on 10th Street. So we're very happy to have them involved, and couldn't be happier that they're going to be up and running soon. And throughout this time, we've also been working closely with the Smithsonian, who is also working on a master plan for the southern portion of their property along the National Mall. This is really important for the connection at 10th Street and Independence. And so, what they do at that intersection and on their property, and how that translates to moving across into the 10th Street corridor is very important. And so we'll be working with them throughout this upcoming year, which is very exciting. And then, as Marcel mentioned, we still continue to have very strong interest in new memorials and museums, such as the Benjamin Banneker Memorial and the American People's Museum, locating within the 10th Street corridor and at Banneker itself. So we were hopeful that that we will see some sort of commemoration and new museums in this area as well in the near future. So that brings me to where we are today. We're presenting these concepts. We have, since the last public meeting in May, been to CFA twice. We were at NCPC, and then we've pulled together our working group in the Southwest Eco District Task Force to sort of review all of this work. We will be taking all of this to the National Capital Planning Commission as a concept in January, at the January Commission meeting. Then the two projects sort of diverge a little bit. 10th Street, the 10th Street work will be sort of put on hold until we can start working with the bid to do short-term improvements, and then the long-term improvements will happen as major redevelopment happens along 10th Street. But it's really important to have a concept in place to define not only the right-of-way for 10th Street as these properties potentially redevelop, but also to make sure as they're redeveloping over a period of time that we're all trying to, redevelop towards the same vision. And so we will place that on hold for a little while until the big properties redevelop. And then with Banneker, we will be taking that concept and handing it over to the National Park Service, who will then bring it through the actual design and review process in NEPA. That project is part of the P.N. Hoffman's requirement for the wharf development project, and so that project does have funding, and we're really excited to actually see that come to fruition, and I know that the National Park Service is too. So with that, I'd like to bring up Otto Condon with ZGF to talk about the design.
Thanks, Diane. Good evening. So I first want to talk about the short-term improvements, and if you were here at the meeting, the last public meeting in May, we identified a framework, and we've really taken the feedback to develop a more refined programmatic concept. And as Diane mentioned, the idea was really to come up with sort of the framework for how all the development and all the various stakeholders can start to move both designs forward. The design framework itself is we looked at 10th Street as a real unified connection with potential episodic features, what we call the magnet at Smithsonian, because we really need to attract people to come down 10th Street. The opportunity for Maryland Avenue to take on a more civic role, and then there could be a cultural node with that intersection. L'Enfant Plaza itself is really at the peak of 10th Street, which has about a 14-foot rise, and it peaks at L'Enfant Plaza and then goes back down to the river. That's a real opportunity for an urban plaza. Then moving down towards Banneker, which is really the prospect to look over the river. So in terms of short-term improvements, we really wanted to break out the idea of entry and program, and then wayfinding and connection. The first thing for the entry is really in the short term, the intersection with and across the Smithsonian Garden. It's pretty much unidentifiable now, and with some really simple tactical urbanism strategies, we could start to create more of an entry and a gateway at that location, so that people, get a sense that the mall really doesn't end at Independence. In terms of program, we think there's an opportunity for, in a way, decanting some of the other programs that are occurring around DC, like on Pennsylvania Avenue, in order to create some life, and create a festival zone right across from the Smithsonian. And thinking of how people may actually, first thing you need to do is let people see what's happening. You want people to see it from the Garden and Smithsonian, but also to start to build off the energy from the waterfront development, and also captive audience on the freeway. The opportunities for doing something at the bridge is sort of barbelling 10th Street to start to create some energy and pull people in. Actually, that image on the lower left is a photo sim of taking just one block of a festival on Pennsylvania Avenue and actually putting it down on 10th Street. And so we think it's a real opportunity. We've been talking with the organizers of the bid, and if there's a way to expedite the process, it might be a way to move it forward and really start to create the energy for the area. With that, there could also be additional improvements like temporary art, lighting, and things such as stages. In terms of wayfinding and connections, with the current configuration, there needs to be improvements for really the crosswalks, not only at Independence, but also at L'Enfant Plaza, in order to make that transition to the bridge structure, since there are really no sidewalks on the over the freeway. And then to get down to the waterfront, to make both the future connection to where towards the fish pier and also to 9th Street. We also think just from a traffic management and pedestrian safety, these little purple areas show opportunities for reconfiguring some of the streets, making them actually behave better with some simple curb line improvements and some enhanced intersections. In terms of wayfinding, there's an opportunity for some innovative lighting, some more innovative signage, just to really start to get people to know that if you're at the Smithsonian, things don't end at Independence, and really start to draw people down. So with that, and those are really, as part of the scope, the idea was to identify things that can be done quicker and easier and don't require large investments. And that once, as Diane mentioned, with the bid being established, maybe that's something that could start to occur in the more immediate future, maybe even 2014. So the next is the interim connection for Banneker. And if any of you are at the meeting, you recall we looked earlier at how to get, if you come down from, does this actually show up there? Oh, it does, okay. 10th Street to make the connection across to the future waterfront development. And yet there's, as part of the Southwest Eco Plan, there's a 100-foot corridor that is really the view corridor from Banneker down to the water. And so we were looking at how do you fit the circulation improvements, the stairs and potential ramp within that area. To put the stairs and ramp, because of the grades, it didn't fit. This scheme was trying to put the stairs in that zone and then using the area to the west as the ramps. And I think generally the feedback from the public meeting from CFA and NCPC was that's just trying to put too much stuff in a narrow corridor, and it didn't really do justice to the connection. And this illustration, I think, actually starts to illustrate that there's just a lot of more additional walls they're creating. Maybe it was more visual barrier. So we got, with all that feedback, we started to look at maybe there's a way to incorporate the stairs, and the actual feedback we got was don't try to put everything in that one zone. Maybe we should look at the accessible route going down to 9th Street with some landscape improvements, which is showing on this diagram, and really try to make the jumping off point for the stairs at that intersection, use the existing break where the bike ramp is, and then start to make a more gradual transition for the stairs. This was also kind of based on the understanding of the Banneker, whether or not it's a historic structure, and the previous scheme required more modifications to the walls, which would require more review of the historic nature. So this one is a little more sensitive to its current status until it's figured out. And here is a close-up showing if you're coming down the center median, improved crosswalks. We've widened the edges made some transition plazas so it actually would accommodate accessibility and curb ramps. A little more seating areas along that edge, and then brought the stair entry off the existing where the bike path comes in, and started to use more of a terraced step approach. That is radial with Banneker, and pulled away so that we had enough area to actually create a few transition zones to accommodate the grades. Then on this side, these are the existing crosswalks, and with the slopes, in order to get a 5% or less than 5% so that it meets ADA requirements, we think it's an opportunity to provide both, or the ADAF on this side, and actually an enhanced connection with some landscaping along the path. Ultimately, this whole site will be, could be redeveloped with, in the long term, with museums and such. And so at that point, the buildings can actually be used to accommodate some of the vertical circulation. This is just a close-up showing the new intersection that is being built as part of the waterfront development, and the steps with some of the grades tied back, or the retaining walls tied back into the grades to create some landscape terraces, and a more generous approach for the stairs. And then in perspective, this is an opportunity to, by kind of stretching the stairs out, to really incorporate the landscape more. We still need to do a lot of work on understanding some of the structure of this wall. This is I'll call it the Pringle wall, which is next to the Banneker fountain. It's kind of shaped like a Pringle. Then this wall is the wall that's the road, and we still need to better understand the structure and how much we can actually pull some of the soil away. But it's an opportunity for some green walls. And then a few intermittent walls for kind of stepping up the landscape. And as part of the next and final wrap-up is we're going to, and some of the comments we received is, how do we make these walls a little more generous in the curve so that it's a little more sympathetic to Banneker itself. And then here's the stairs which come down to the new intersection. And because of the grades, it's an opportunity to create some terracing and maybe even a temporary sculpture garden to start to activate the space. And this just, some images just showing how we can really soften the walls up with green wall technology. So when we go to the boards, these boards are over there, the back of the room. We'd really like your input on, does this seem, if you remember the previous concept, does this seem like a vast improvement? That would be great to hear. And then I guess if this is the right way to move forward so that the National Park Service can move it forward and we can really make that connection to the waterfront. So long-term improvements. If you recall, it's really, we call it 10th Street, but it's really a street and 3 bridge structures. North of Maryland Avenue is built on ground. Between Maryland and the freeway, it's essentially 3 independent bridges. With that, as you can see the photo below, and that provides circulation to LaFont Plaza and the post office building. And then at Banneker, we're back to soil. So as part of our study, we really wanted to understand, the drive was to really make a green connection. And putting trees on a bridge with the structure can get complicated in terms of trying to make sure there's enough soil for the trees. So that was one of our first things which we showed previously, was how we wanted to make sure that the programmatic concept was achievable and feasible. And so this diagram just starts to show that the bridge actually changes span direction. So trying to get some sort of rhythm within the various structures it's a challenge, but we think it's doable. Last time we presented 3 design approaches, and it was really to get feedback on what is the priorities for all the agencies, the stakeholders, the public in terms of the feel of the street. And so we had the hardscape approach, which is really probably closest to the current experience, but with some trees. Then the softscape approach, which is really more of a linear garden, maybe more reflective of the mall. And then finally the waterscape, which was, as part of our water study, is how can we collect the water, and we were trying to collect all the rainwater, and how do we use it, how do we clean it, how does it enhance the environment. And so these were the sort of realm of options. And as Diane mentioned, we went through several meetings and got some really great feedback and an understanding of the priorities in order to move this forward to a framework that can be further carried as all the projects and the bid starts to, and the agencies help to guide the more, I'll say, more detailed design. In terms of the right-of-way, since that's one of the most critical things for the Federal Triangle South RFP, was the current right-of-way is 150. We looked at narrowing it, expanding it, but the 150 actually seemed like the right dimension. The current right-of-way or street configuration has a 29-foot sidewalk, 39-foot median, and a 29-foot sidewalk on the other side with roads that are 26.5 feet. If you recall in the Southwest, the actual study, we did look at alternative configurations, whether it was like a median down the middle, whether the road's down the middle, whether it's asymmetric. And actually, again, from what's the best idea for the street that's flexible and actually achievable, we decided that keeping the center median was the best idea. It was an opportunity for making a curbless environment. We put the asphalt on a diet and turned it to a 20-foot road, which would accommodate 1 travel lane and 8-foot parking, which gave us a median width of 52, which with 52 feet versus 39 actually gives you room for landscape, it gives you room for programming. And the 20-foot roadway gives you an opportunity for, if you do a festival, you can actually turn 1 parking lane and 1 travel lane into 2 travel lanes at key times. And so this is actually how it could work. We could do two-way travel on one side of the street and then use all this area for programming. And I think this amount of tents is actually the Festival of India, if I recall. And so there's an opportunity for, occupying the street and really bringing people the whole length. In terms of how do we maximize the tree canopy, there was no way to actually have a full tree canopy along the whole length because of the bridge structures. And so we're looking at where there's dirt, let's utilize the dirt to get the maximum tree growth. Also an opportunity for a cistern for collecting the stormwater, which could be used for building gray water systems, irrigation. And in terms of the stormwater plan, the idea of these cisterns, our initial findings are a size that's slightly less than the size that the cisterns that were put in the mall. So we think it's actually, it's very achievable and feasible for the size of cisterns. In the areas of the bridge structure where there's an opportunity, because there's nothing happening basically below that area, it's an opportunity, we could cut into the bridge spans and create areas for larger trees and also a cistern. But then there are some areas which are in the orange where, because of the limitations of the bridge structure and things happening below without totally changing the access to the development, we had to have a different strategy for smaller trees, perhaps placed closer together to still get that sense of the canopy. This is the diagram actually about water. So in our modeling, if in order to collect all the water, reuse it, clean it, the idea is that it could be use the potable water where you can interact at the urban plaza, use surface water to treat the water to enhance the environment, still do some collection below the street, opportunities for collecting off the building. We think there's an opportunity for doing heat exchange, basically similar to like geothermal, use that heat, the mass of the water for buildings. And in terms of quantities, the water on the street might be about 100,000 gallons. The cistern might be in the 500,000 to 700,000 gallon range, which is comparable to the mall size. And so that's the kind of program that we're looking at and that we've been pricing out as part of the stormwater study and trying to illustrate in these concepts. So after we kind of talked about, or we presented those sort of three approaches, a lot of the feedback we got was the program was understood, but let's kind of talk now about the experience. And so we started calling it more as an urban garden promenade, that it can change experience, it can build upon what's underneath and to reflect the structure, but also create unique areas. And we should take advantage of the grade up to the plaza. So as a diagram, the idea of coming from the Smithsonian, maybe up to Maryland, it's a little bit more of a passive green because we can really get a lot more landscape there. That's more open as a feature near LaFont. And then the landscape water furnishings can really create more of a cascade, maybe a little bit more organic and less rigorous as it connects down to the waterfront to create the final prospect down to the river. So in the diagram for the ground plane, as you'll see, we're showing it's a little more open at Independence, opportunity for a water feature, the Magnet Plaza, a little more green with some integrated water to Maryland, opening up more at the Urban Plaza, and then a little bit more of a staccato type approach to that. We'll still maintain some of the rhythm of the trees so you get that sense, but it's still a little bit more playful as you move down towards the river. The trees, this gives a sense of the rhythm of the trees in terms of, and the size, the general size we think we might be able to accommodate or achieve in terms of the overall canopy. Still thinking that it maintains the rhythm, but it's a little bit providing some opportunities for bringing sun where you want sun, but also providing shade. And then in terms of permeability for the length of the area, at Independence, this area is probably most, it's really like it's an urban plaza complementing the garden. It may be a little bit more, mid-block and crosswalks up to Maryland. And then when you get to the urban plaza, it's really as permeable as possible, so it's a curbless environment. And then there may be more opportunities for programming down over the freeway as the freeway gets redeveloped. In terms of programming, it reflects the layout with the possibility to use the whole street, whether it's this side or the other side, and then making sure there's opportunities for programming larger areas at each of the nodes. So in terms of walking down the street, here's what it might look like from coming in from Independence, crossing the garden at the Smithsonian, that the area right in the median is an opportunity for a water feature that could be turned on and turned off. Here we're showing some vertical opportunities, but it could be, with programming, really start to draw people in. The linear garden, actually we looked at an asymmetric approach in order to create a little bit more green on the east side of the street in terms of for better sun, for shading, and opportunities for incorporating some of the water features. And with the grades, this may be a little bit more of a grade extreme, but Meridian Park is an example. Here's actually Millennium Park in Chicago. We think there's the opportunities to really use water as an architectural landscape feature to really complement the space, and still have opportunities for creating a little vertical element too. So as we move forward, we're going to be writing up really some guidelines and design and parameters for the framework, so that as the design moves forward, it can actually be developed to a level of quality and detail to be considered for the whole street. At Maryland Avenue, part of the idea is that it should be open for reinforcing the civic nature of Maryland Avenue, and also because there are opportunities for vertical, or there should be opportunities for vertical connections down to D Street, because that is actually one of the ways to get to the metro on the east of 10th Street. The plaza itself, more open, opportunities to, we think, well, this shows enlivening the edge of the post office building with some structures. The potential future development at LaFont Plaza, the plaza itself should be of a quality so that it's interactive for in terms of touching the water. The ideas itself, we haven't developed them as much as looked at the 150-foot dimension, actually a little bit more, 150 feet. In the scale, it's an opportunity to, as it gets further, we could do a framed water feature in the median, similar to, again, Millennium Park. Maybe it's more of an architectural feature in the median. This is actually a park in Portland that we designed with Olin, which has both a fountain and some architectural features. Bright scale, it was heavily programmed for large activities, and then finally thinking about how you could design the plaza from building to building, and this happens to be in Rome. But these are all about the same scale. So we think, as we move forward, the plaza really needs to interact and engage the buildings on both sides, and so that there needs to be the dialogue as the design for both goes forward. Finally, as you're moving down the linear garden aspect between the plaza down to the river, opportunities for being a little bit more informal, raised planters because of the bridge, seating, water features, smaller trees but clustered to create a little bit more variety, and then this starts to show some actual water features. And these are down at by Washington Circle, right by GW, just built them. And they're actually a part of an apartment building, but they would function structurally the same way. They have the water feature, they have a cistern below, and it recirculates the water in order to keep it active and not stagnant. And I think that's an opportunity for where your areas are limited because you're over the circulation of the lower street. And then finally, getting to the approach to Banneker. And here it's, we're showing pretty much where it is now because there's still a lot to be worked out with what the future of Banneker might be. In terms of long term, we still think that it's going to be developed in phases, with the Federal Triangle South being one phase. When Maryland is capped, that's going to be a project in itself. LaFont Plaza is an opportunity for the development, the private development that's adjacent to it, and then also how to activate the post office. The freeway, maybe long term, is when the freeway gets capped for some development. And then finally Banneker. So I think, it's critical, and for your comments too, is that we're looking for a programmatic concept. We need to have it defined enough so that even though this is built in phases, it's a concept that's clear enough that when it's all said and done, it'll actually read as something that had a big idea behind it. It wasn't just, you don't walk down and go, oh yeah, this was the 70s, this was the 80s. Well, maybe 2020, maybe 2030, that sort of approach. So for the discussion, I guess we want to talk about, does this seem like the right framework for 10th Street in terms of the program, ideas, or is this the right approach in order to both in terms of the short term and the long term? And one of the things we've had some discussions were about the design characteristics. Right now 10th Street's a period piece with the circular globe lights, and some people radically love them, and some people, I would say, radically dislike them. And that's just one example of how with furnishings you can create a strong identity. So, what we'd like some feedback on is not only the character of the street, but what is its role as both a monumental core street and also a neighborhood amenity. And with that, I'll turn it back to Diane.
Okay, so the last part of this evening's presentation before I'll get to go talk over at the boards is I wanted to just introduce you to what we are doing with regards to forwarding the Southwest Eco District Plan beyond the design for 10th Street and Banneker. One of the action items in that plan was to sort of synthesize the objectives and design strategies into a very cohesive document, which we're calling right now the design guidelines, and just so that they are all in one place, so when Federal Triangle South moves forward, you can actually look at them without reading about the background of the history and all the other stuff that's within the Southwest Eco District Plan. But the other part of it is we realized we missed some stuff when we did that plan, and this is an opportunity for us to actually forward some of our thinking. We're not doing a whole new plan or anything like that, but there are a couple of key places that I just wanted to introduce you to. We don't have the answers right now, but these we feel that we can advance this to further just sort of define how we can bridge the national and the local city here. As Marcel, I think, mentioned earlier, I mean, this is a really unique place with, the monumental core and hopefully a very vibrant new neighborhood, probably more unique than any other place in the city, and it really could be amazing. So these will not be, this won't be a regulatory document, it's just going to be guidelines, but we do think it will be very helpful, and of course it's going to build on a lot of the resources that you see here. And we'll have more opportunity to comment on them. But some of the things that we're looking at are the street classifications, building form and scale, park character and function, and sort of the character of hardscape and landscape. So I just wanted to bring you up to speed because 10th Street is a part of this, and certainly Independence Avenue as well, on what some of our initial thinking is. This is also going to be important to how we comment on this new zoning for this area, which, as I mentioned, is open for public comment right now. So actually, Otto and I are going to tag team this.
So, right now it's a super block, and there's like very minimal streets, and they aren't really defined. And so part of the Southwest Eco Plan was to start to organize it. Well, first break up the super blocks, introducing new streets, and start to create in the plan there was the classifications by monumental or civic or city. This was a little more functional approach, so it could be coordinated with Office of Planning, Zoning, and also Department of Transportation's requirements for loading and such. So this was really what are the primary streets, which are the most important streets, the streets where you want to walk down, you want to, the retail or the active store street frontage wants to be, versus what are the secondary streets where, that's the place where you want to do your back of door stuff, your loading for cars, your garbage, your just your general loading. So we wanted to make this just a real simple diagram showing, how to organize the streets.
And of course, the primary streets being Independence Avenue, Maryland Avenue, 10th Street, and Virginia Avenue is, and actually I also want to say we have handouts here when we finish, if you want to, we have a matrix of actually street dimensions and the character of the streets that you're more than welcome to take with you.
And so this diagram actually shows, the primary streets where you want the active building frontage, which could be guidelines for, or includes guidelines for what uses should be on the ground floor, in terms of, how lobbies are oriented, how you may have displays or retail, what the first floor height should be so that you actually get a sense of the frontage. Transparency, often you aim for like a 75% transparency in the facade so that it feels like you get eyes on the street. And then the building entries themselves. And versus so here, with understanding the active building frontage is also the recommended frontage for primary building entries. And the entry should be facing the parks, facing the grand streets, and to help to reinforce the character. To complement that is the secondary frontages, which where you would want to put the parking, the service, and the loading access. And really, if you think of the super blocks, what you're doing is starting to create, break up the super blocks, create the secondary streets, and start to funnel the loading and access into those secondary streets.
And so this actually is the handout that I have, so I'll make sure that that's available as soon as we finish the presentation here. But it sort of details a lot of the stuff that we didn't include in the plan and a lot of the assumptions that we used in terms of the streets and the dimensions and the character of the streets. Okay, so that brings me to building scale and form. Now we addressed this a little bit in the Southwest Eco District Plan, but we wanted to come back and take a closer look at the impact of the potential redevelopment, most particularly the Forrestal building on Independence Avenue, and how it might impact views of especially the Smithsonian institution and their buildings on the southern side of the mall. So this is one of the views that we'll be looking at in terms of looking at stepping back buildings, the height of buildings on Independence, and how that might impact the mall itself. When you're on the mall, what it feels like when you're standing in front of the Smithsonian Castle, how high is 130 feet? What does that mean in terms of, is it towering over the castle? Should we be stepping it back at a certain point? That sort of thing. Again, this is from the Haupt Gardens, looking out 10th Street. Do those buildings on 10th Street step back, or is it better to have, a more, intimate space defined by, 130-foot buildings and walls there? And again, looking down Independence, this view is looking east. Again, sort of looking at the scale of buildings on the southern side of Independence compared with the Smithsonian buildings. And then, of course, also recognizing, and we did talk about this in the plan, the scale of any future museum on Banneker and how it respects the residential neighborhood to the east and the south. And so we will be drafting recommendations. These are just very, these are draft, but it talks about basically respecting all of those views that we just went through. And then, of course, respecting the residential neighborhood across from Banneker Park as well. Those are really important. And, we don't know at this time what that exactly means, except that we're recognizing that there's important views and institutions in the National Mall itself that, have a certain prominence. And then lastly, the one thing we are also going to articulate a little bit more is the character of the parks. And so I think, now we've talked about Banneker a lot tonight. This clearly is, we see this as more of a monumental park. It is, for decades we've talked about having a major museum here, a memorial, cultural, some sort of a commemorative work. It could be multiple museums, but that's very different from the character of what we see at Reservation 113, which I think we see more as a neighborhood park. And I think one of the things we'd love to hear from you tonight also is just sort of some of the things that you think would make this a much better neighborhood in terms of those parks and reservations. And so, of course, as I just said, Banneker should have a more monumental character, whereas Reservation 113 might be more of a neighborhood character feel. And I think Otto addressed this part very well, just talking about the elements. You know, we want these to be timeless, but, you know, it's sort of incorporating new and more traditional qualities, but trying to, you know, articulate what that exactly means is sort of difficult. So if you have any thoughts on, you know, just some of the hardscape and landscape elements that that will be used in some of these parks at some point in time, we would love to hear that as well. So that, we have plenty of time now to talk at all of the different images over there. I just want to point out, all of this is on our website, so you can also comment online. I think we'll take comments, public comments on the presentation and the concepts that you saw this evening until the end of this year, December 31st. And as I mentioned, we'll be back at NCPC presenting this in the January Commission meeting. And then you can also fill out the comment form and put it in the comment box, or you can just write on the boards themselves. And so there's a lot of people here with Southwest Eco District name tags. I'm more than happy to talk to you about all of your stuff. So thank you for coming tonight, and we'll see you over there.
And you want to kind of, you might want to try to split up between each of the boards and then split, just to